Hi everyone, I'm Professor Sally Eaves, Chair of Cyber Trust at the Global Foundation of Cyber Studies, and it's my pleasure to speak today with Stephen Douglas, who is Head of 5G Strategy at Spirent Communications. Welcome, Steve.
Hi, Sally, and it's great to be here today.
Oh, thank you. And we're going to dive into all things Open RAN today. So I'd love to start, Steve, by really looking at why Open RAN is so important for the industry. Now, who's benefiting and how do they benefit?
Yes, Sally, a way to look at it is after years of consolidation of the radio market. The industry was left with only a few main vendors supplying, in reality, closed radio systems. And if you consider the importance of the radio network and what it plays today, and not only delivering cellular communications, but also in unlocking the future opportunities around industrial and enterprise private networks, then it became really critical and important to actually stimulate additional diversity, flexibility, and innovation within the market. And these really are the three key things or benefits that are being sought today in Open RAN. And if you look at them one by one, that firstly, vendor diversity. More vendors creates more choice, increased competition, lower costs. So, a reasonably obvious reason why to do it. Secondly, though, is greater flexibility, especially in the deployment options, the ability to use sort of mix and match or best of breed vendors and configurations to meet the cost challenges and complexity, especially when you're starting to think about how you're going to deploy in rural locations, in buildings, out in these private enterprise environments. And then thirdly, which is probably the most exciting, is about spurring innovation. As a movement and an architecture, it can stimulate additional innovation and monetization opportunities in the radio domain with new suppliers and ecosystems. And we're already starting to see that today with positive early signs of some new startups coming into the mix and developing quite innovative new applications around self-optimizing or self-driving networks.
Absolutely. I love the range of impact there. So lower cost, diverse supply chain, negating vendor lock-in, gear interoperability as well, and also that flexibility for network architecture you mentioned as well. So quite a range of benefits there. That's fantastic. So also maybe from the market perspective, what new markets will this be opening up or new use cases that ORAN will enable?
Yeah, there's obviously going to be a range of markets and use cases, and I would say they're going to be gradually unlocked. It's not going to be an overnight sort of activity, and I think this is because Open RAN needs to mature and the service providers gain confidence in how to operate and manage it. But there's probably four key early opportunities that sort of we're tracking at the moment. The first is really around the current 4G LTE networks, and that's really around densification. Where current Open RAN suppliers have comparative 4G solutions available today, so they can address that sort of need. Rural deployments is certainly an early opportunity that we're seeing at the moment. It's lower risk. It requires lower performance requirements. There's less, at the end of the day, users or subscribers that could be impacted if there was an issue in the rural environment. So that's seen as probably an opportunity. Indoor deployments is another one where the current macro networks that we have today actually would provide, in essence, the fallback or the safety net for Open RAN if there was teething problems. And then you look at the private networking environments as well. And really here's, the lower cost and the flexibility requirements that Open RAN actually can deliver, make it a very attractive opportunity to be used there. I think if you look at mainstream 5G, that's probably still 12 to 18 months away. There's still a number of technical and operational challenges which need to be addressed, including the support of energy-intensive radio application or functions like massive MIMO and beamforming. But there's a lot of effort going into that at the moment, but I would expect that probably still, not until next year at the earliest, until we'll start to see that
timeline there. I think that's super helpful for the audience, and that range again of use cases. So, from cost sensitive 5G network use cases right through to those private commercial 5G use cases you were talking about there. So that's fantastic, really useful. And also I would say that you've got that clear and compelling examples you brought to the fore yet, but we've also got discussion about the change and the challenges that are involved in this as well. So I wonder if we could speak about some of those challenges, how RAN is built, deployed and run. What are the challenges the industry is facing at the moment in terms of getting the design, the build, the testing, and the running of this right?
Yeah, there's no hiding the fact that this is a pretty big change for the radio network, so there obviously comes with a lot of challenges with it. I think what we're seeing today, we're really grouping them probably into four categories. You have maturity of the system itself, you have security concerns, There's the risk of cost being inflated, and then finally operational readiness. And again, I mean, if we look at these sort of one by one, let's start with maturity. I mean, this is really relating to the vendors themselves. Are they conformant or not to the new open interface standards, which are going to guarantee that interworking and flexible choice? Obviously, in this early stage, there's a lot of interpretation of how to create that openness, and that's a lot of work going there to make sure that they do adhere to it. And this is sort of followed by that need to prove that these new radio components are actually as performant and robust as the traditional radio offerings, because the reality is that's table stakes for many of the big service providers out there. In regards to the security side of it, I think what we're seeing at the moment is really the network security teams really starting to voice concerns of, not that there maybe is more security overheads or risks, but simply just better understanding of what those additional risks are, what would be the mitigation techniques. And this not only is in the network architecture, but also on a more diverse supply chain. There's more vendors, they've never had to deal with that before. Costs is probably the third one that raises its ugly head now and again. And that relates to just, again, concerns about potential new operational overheads to manage the new and smaller vendors who may be higher risk and higher touch, higher maintenance. And then also how to solve that challenge of and cost implication of installation and commissioning. Where service providers now may need to invest themselves in becoming the system integrator, doing the work themselves, or having to go out and get third parties to stitch this all together. And I would say the last one that we're probably seeing at the moment is probably operational readiness challenges. And again, this is really, the service provider internal teams, their departments, they're needing now to deal with not only multiple new vendors, but they're now starting to see volumes and velocity of software upgrades and configuration changes occurring, which they've never had to deal with before. We're starting to see release cycles moving from a few a year to probably a few every few weeks. So it's a big change internally also for the operators to embrace that.
Absolutely. Like always, it's technology, process, culture all coming together with change like this, isn't it? And I also found in your new ebook as well, the research showing that despite these challenges, we've seen it with waves of change before, when you've got that early adoption, it actually, delivers a lot of key advantages to organizations as well, like with VoIP, for example, in the past. So really, really interesting. I'd love to think about a little bit more about your leadership, really, about Spirent in terms of test and assurance. So what could you share with the audience about that vital role really of testing for ORAN deployment, and what are the changes to bear in mind here, and what can we suggest to help ORAN vendors with that process?
Yeah, I think one thing is clear that, if Open RAN is to achieve that potential and deal with all of the stakeholder requirements and challenges, then I think from our perspective, testing is going to be its best friend in building primarily stakeholder confidence, which is going to be critical. Confidence that it's robust, confidence that it's interoperable, it's performant, it can scale, it provides technical parity with traditional RAN, it's efficient to deploy and operate, that confidence that supply chains are going to be secure, that regulatory requirements are going to be met. And the most successful strategy we feel is going to be built around vendor neutral, automated and continuous testing methodologies. And we look at this really across a number of key dimensions. Firstly, it's performing what we would call nodal or isolation testing with these independent elements or components to make sure that they can handle the expected traffic and functionality and don't become the weak link in the chain. Then you move on to something called adjacent or progressive testing, which is really around interoperability and scale. This is where you're combining functions possibly from different vendors together. And in this phase, the big service providers, they aren't just testing interoperability. It's about interoperability at scale. Will it really perform? And then the final area really within that, or the third area, is the end-to-end testing. This is where the entire Open RAN system or environment, from the core network right down to the handsets, devices you and I use, must be tested in unison to ensure the whole system meets specifications and operational requirements. And they become sort of the three critical stages of it. But there's a fourth stage now creeps into the world we now live in, and this is really continuous testing. And I would say, truthfully, there's no final end stage for Open RAN testing going forward. Operators are going to need to adopt a continuous testing approach. In other words, testing is going to be ongoing for new updates, patches, potentially new vendors being swapped in or out. And to this end, I think automation technologies will be the cornerstone of any successful Open RAN testing strategy to both reduce costs, but also reduce time to market.